Picture a city that has convinced itself it has solved the problem of being disgusting. Now picture that same city dying anyway. That's London in 1854. And I need you to understand something about that contradiction before we go any further, because it's the whole engine of this story. By 1854, London has gaslit itself into believing it is a modern metropolis. It has newspapers, it has railways, it has the Great Exhibition just 3 years in its rearview mirror, that glass palace in Hyde Park where the British Empire put the entire world's achievements on display and basically said very loudly to anyone who would listen, "Look at us, we figured it out." It has not figured it out. London in 1854 smells like the inside of a body that is rotting from the outside in. It has 2.5 million people crammed into a space designed for maybe a third of that. The Thames, which people still somehow refer to as a river, is essentially a slow-moving open sewer. The smell in summer is so bad that the curtains in the Houses of Parliament are soaked in chloride of lime to stop the MPs from fainting. That really happened. They call it the Great Stink, though in 1854 that particular catastrophe is still 4 years away. Right now, it's merely a significant stink, a notable stink, a stink that Londoners have stopped noticing the way you stop noticing the hum of your own refrigerator, right up until the moment it kills you. And underneath London, underneath the cobblestones, underneath the cellars, underneath the foundations of the churches and the printing houses and the gin shops and the respectable homes of respectable people, there is a network of cesspits, hundreds of thousands of them, deep pits dug into the ground where waste goes, theoretically contained, theoretically sealed away from the drinking water, theoretically. There is a hand pump on Broad Street in the neighbourhood of Soho. It sits at the corner where Poland Street meets Broad Street, and people have been drinking from it for years. Good water, they say. Clean water. Better than the other pumps. Sweet even. Children drink from it on their way to school. Families fill their buckets every morning. Coffee stalls use it. Local businesses use it. There is a cesspit 12 feet away from that pump. Nobody knows this yet. You will find out the hard way. This is Soho in 1854. Not the Soho you might know. The restaurants, the music venues, the tourists with their cameras. This is Soho before it became interesting in any positive sense. This is working class Soho, immigrant Soho, cram 12 people to a house Soho. 500 people live on Broad Street alone. Think about that. 500 people on one street. The houses are 4 stories tall and packed sideways like books on a shelf, and every floor has families in it, multiple families sometimes, sublet rooms and sublet rooms within rooms, people sleeping in corners of kitchens, children sharing beds 3 and 4 deep. It's not glamorous, but it's alive. And then, on the evening of the 31st of August, 1854, it starts dying. Honestly, I have no idea if you're listening to this to fall asleep or because you have a thing for stories about Victorian diseases. Both are completely valid. Cholera is genuinely fascinating in a horrible way. The mystery of it, the speed of it, the way it cuts through a neighbourhood like a knife through wet paper. Or maybe you're just someone who can't sleep and you've exhausted everything else on your playlist. Either way, get comfortable. Here we go. Your eyes open in darkness. For 1/2 second, that particular half second that happens every morning before your brain catches up with the rest of you. You don't know where you are. Then it hits you. The smell. Not one smell. Never one smell in London. Always layers. Ink first. Sharp and mineral and slightly sweet in a way that coats the back of your throat. You've been breathing it for 8 months and you still notice it every morning. Lead underneath that, the cold, faintly metallic smell of the type cases that line the walls of the floor below, each tiny compartment holding its little soldier of a letter, waiting to be arranged into meaning. Coal dust from the fireplace that serves the whole building, imperfectly, smoke seeping up through gaps in the floorboards. The particular warm, sour smell of 4 people sleeping in a room not much larger than a modern bathroom. And outside, through the window that barely closes, the general ambient reek of a London summer morning. Horse dung and rotting vegetables, and the particular brown perfume of a city that throws its waste wherever it can. And underneath all of it, faint but unmistakable, the Thames. Even here, half a mile from the river, you can smell it on warm mornings, especially on warm mornings. A low background note of organic decay, like the city itself is slowly composting. Welcome to Broad Street, Soho, August 31st, 1854. You're lying on a rope bed in the attic of number 12, a narrow house wedged between a bootmaker's to the left and a coffee shop to the right, on a street that is currently, at just past 5 in the morning, starting to stir from sleep. The ropes that hold the mattress have stretched again overnight, and the whole thing sags in the middle, so you've spent another night slowly rolling toward the centre of your sleeping area, while Thomas, your fellow apprentice, has spent the same night slowly rolling toward you from his side. You wake up most mornings with his bony knee somewhere in your back. This morning is no different. You push yourself up. The rope bed protests with a sound like a small reluctant orchestra, creaking wood and stretched hemp and the stiff rustle of the straw mattress that needs replacing, and has needed replacing since sometime in January probably. Your name is William Stead. You're 17 years old. You've been in London since last November, when you came from your father's farm in Wiltshire, a village called Cote. Not even a proper village really, just a cluster of stone houses and a church, with nothing but a letter of introduction from the village schoolmaster to Mr. Edward Coggins, printer of Broad Street, Soho, who was apparently impressed enough by the letter and by the evidence of your basic literacy to take you on as an apprentice compositor. Compositor, that's the word. Not printer. That's what Mr. Coggins calls himself. Compositor is what you're learning to be. The person who takes the letters and sets them one by one into words and sentences and paragraphs, and eventually into the iron form that goes to press. The person whose hands do the thinking while the press does the work. Your hands are already ruined for any other purpose, frankly. 8 months of picking up pieces of type, each one smaller than your thumbnail, each one requiring you to grip it with your index finger and thumb and place it with precision, and your fingertips have developed a kind of muscular intelligence of their own. They read type by touch now. You can tell the difference between a capital E and a capital F in the dark, just from the notch at the foot of the letter. You can tell good type from worn type by the slight give when you press it. You can also tell at about 20 paces when a piece of type has been set upside down. Mr. Coggins can do it in the dark, apparently. You're not there yet. The floor is cold under your bare feet. Late August, but the mornings are cool, and the attic floor is bare boards that were never finished properly, gaps between them wide enough to see the light from the composing room below when the gas lamps are lit. Thomas Reeves, 19, from somewhere near Bristol, been here 2 years, is still asleep. He sleeps with absolute conviction, Thomas does. Like a man who has decided that sleep is a job and he intends to do it properly. You've never seen him wake up gradually. He either sleeps or he doesn't. You don't wake him. The argument about who gets to the water basin first is not worth having this early. The basin is in the corner. Yesterday's water is still in it, brownish, slightly cold. You should have emptied it last night. You meant to. The water comes from the street pump 2 doors down, which means it cost you the effort of walking there with a bucket and waiting your turn behind whoever else is there at whatever hour you went. Yesterday morning, that was the widow Susanna Ely, a sharp-faced woman in her 60s who lives in the ground floor room of number 15, and who, despite being barely 5 feet tall, takes up a remarkable amount of space in any queue. And the 2 Doyle brothers from number 9, both of whom work at the match factory on Greek Street, and therefore smell permanently of sulphur and something worse. You splash the brownish water on your face anyway. It's cold enough to cut through the fog of sleep. Good enough. Your clothes hang from the nail by the door, a linen shirt grey with repeated washing. The collar has frayed to the point where there's barely a collar anymore, just an indication of where a collar used to be. You've resewn the button 3 times. Trousers of heavy moleskin, dark enough that the ink stains don't show, which is not an accident. Mr. Coggins was very specific about this when you arrived. Dark trousers, he said, looking you up and down with the expression of a man assessing a horse at market. Whatever you think you're going to wear to work in a printing house, double the darkness, then double it again. He was right. Your first week, you wore your Sunday trousers to the composing room. By Thursday, they were comprehensively ruined. The ink is not ordinary ink. It's a thick, black, oil-based substance that bonds to fabric at a molecular level and never, as far as anyone can tell, comes entirely out. You can boil them. You can scrub them. You can apply turpentine and prayers in equal measure. The stains stay. They become part of the cloth, part of you eventually. Your hands are permanently grey-black in the creases of your knuckles no matter how thoroughly you scrub them, and there is a permanent dark crescent under every fingernail that Mrs. Higgins, your landlady, noted disapprovingly the first week, and has since simply accepted as a fact of your presence, like the way you always leave the attic door slightly ajar. Your boots are at the foot of the bed. Thick leather, iron-tacked soles. Left one has a crack in the heel that lets in water when it rains. You've stuffed it with a piece of oilcloth that needs replacing. This is on your list of things to sort out when you have the money, the time and the willpower all aligned, which hasn't happened yet. You dress quickly. Thomas has not moved. His breathing is steady as a clock, downstairs. The composing room is on the first floor, which is to say the floor above the street. Mr. Coggins doesn't use the ground floor for work. That's the shop front and the ink store and the press room with the great iron Albion press that takes 2 people to work properly and 1 person to damage irreparably, which is a lesson you have already learned at some cost. The gas lamp on the wall hisses and flickers as you turn the tap. The light is yellow-green and slightly unsettling, the way gaslight always is, but it's better than candles for close work, and it fills the room with a warmth that the morning outside hasn't generated yet. The composing room smells differently at this hour. When the work is going, when Mr. Coggins is here and Thomas is at his case and you're at yours and all 3 of you are picking and placing and building up columns of type into the steel galley that will eventually become a page, the room smells of work, of concentration, the ink on your fingers warming slightly with the friction of use, the oil from the lamp, the slight dry smell of paper from the stacks in the corner, but this early before all that starts it smells only of lead. Thousands of pieces of type in their cases. Each piece is an alloy, mostly lead, with tin and antimony to give it hardness, bismuth to keep it from warping when it heats. The smell of all that metal in an enclosed room is subtle but definite, cold and clean and very slightly bitter, like the taste of a new penny, but in your nose instead of your mouth. You stand at your composing stick. The composing stick is a small metal tool, about 8 inches long, adjustable at one end to set the width of your line. You hold it in your left hand, and with your right hand you pick the letters from their compartments in the case in front of you. The case is a wooden tray maybe 2 feet by 18 inches, divided into compartments, each containing one letter. Capital letters in the upper case, hence the term. Lowercase letters in the lower case, hence that term too. You've been reading that etymology for years without knowing it was etymology at all. Each letter is called a sort. Lowercase e gets the biggest compartment because it's used most. Then T, A, O, I, N. The rare letters, Q, Z, X, get tiny compartments in the corners. You know this layout as well as you know the rooms of your father's farmhouse. Better, probably. You've lived with this case for 8 months. You spent the first 2 weeks just learning where everything was, picking letters with your eyes open, then your eyes half closed, then in the near dark at the end of a long evening. Now your right hand moves on its own. It knows the case. Pick the letter. Feel the notch at the foot. That tiny groove that tells you which way is up. Set it in the composing stick, left to right, the way words go. Space between words. Quad between sentences when needed. Work from top to bottom of the stick, then transfer to the galley. Tighten the column with your fingers. Breathe. Pick the next letter. Mr. Coggins arrives at 5:30. He always arrives at 5:30, which means he must wake up at some time approaching incomprehensible, because he lives on Dean Street, a brisk 10-minute walk away, and he is always, when he arrives, fully dressed, fully alert, and already disapproving of something. This morning he is disapproving of the ink distribution on the press from yesterday. "Look at this," he says, not by way of greeting, gesturing at the press with the particular energy of a man who has been storing this grievance since approximately 4 o'clock in the morning. "Look at the distribution on this roller. You look. The roller, the leather cylinder that carries ink from the ink table to the type, has a faint unevenness on one side, where too much ink has accumulated. It's subtle. You wouldn't have noticed it on your own. Mr. Coggins would notice it from the street, apparently. He is a small man, Edward Coggins. 52 years old, though he looks older, in the way that men who work physical, precise jobs often do. The face slightly tighter, the eyes slightly more focused, as if years of examining tiny things at close range have changed the structure of his attention permanently. His hands are extraordinary, broad, strong, deeply stained with 50 years of ink, capable of feeling the slightest imperfection in a block of type at a touch. You have watched those hands set a full measure of type in the time it takes you to set a line. "I'll fix the roller," you say, after you finish the church notices. "Yes, sir." He doesn't ask about Thomas. Thomas arriving late is an established fact of the universe, like rain and taxation, and Mr. Coggins has made his peace with it. You go back to your case. The church notices are for St. James's on Piccadilly, a standing order set the same format every week, with only the names of services and times changed. Not interesting work, compositionally speaking, but steady, predictable, the kind of work you can do while the other part of your brain is elsewhere. Today the other part of your brain is on the letter from your mother, It arrived 3 days ago. Your mother doesn't write often. She can read adequately, but writing costs her effort, and the penny post requires a penny. And pennies on a Wiltshire farm don't grow on the hedgerows. So when a letter arrives in her handwriting, the slightly unsteady copper plate that Sister Jenkins taught in the village school before Sister Jenkins got old and the school got a new teacher, it carries weight beyond its paper. This letter contained 2 pieces of news. The first was that your younger brother Samuel had been hired as a farmhand on the estate of a neighbour, which was good news, which was the kind of news you can read quickly and fold away. The second was that your father had been ill since July. Not deadly ill, the letter was careful to say. Not dangerously ill, but ill in the way that men in their 50s sometimes get. Ill. A cough that doesn't clear. A tiredness that sleep doesn't touch. Likely nothing, your mother wrote. Likely to be better by the time you read this. The word likely in that sentence has been nagging at you for 72 hours. Pick the letter. Feel the notch. Set it in the stick. Likely. Thomas arrives at 6:15. He appears at the composing room door still buttoning his waistcoat, and Mr. Coggins doesn't look up from the proof he's reading. "Morning," Thomas says to you, passing behind your case. "You're late." "I'm here." This is also an established dialogue. You've had it perhaps 100 times. It doesn't go anywhere. Thomas takes his place at his case and begins working. Despite his relationship with punctuality, Thomas is genuinely talented at his job. His hands move faster than yours. Not much faster, but consistently faster, with a certainty of motion that makes you slightly envious on your better days and deeply envious on your worse ones. He's been doing this for 2 years and it shows. "What are you on?" he asks. "Church notices for St. James's." "Right." He's working on a pamphlet. Something political. A parliamentary report that Mr. Coggins is printing for a firm in Cheapside. Dense, technical text that requires careful composition and absolute accuracy. The kind of work where a misplaced letter can change a legal meaning entirely. You work in silence for a while. The sound of the composing room is its own particular rhythm. The tiny metallic click of type being lifted from a case. The slightly softer sound of it being placed in the composing stick. The chunk of a completed line being transferred to the galley. Underneath all of it, the hiss of the gas lamp and from outside gradually building as the street wakes. The noise of Broad Street beginning its day. By 7 o'clock, Broad Street is fully alive. And when I say alive, I want you to understand what that means in Soho in 1854, because it's different from any aliveness you've probably encountered. This isn't the quiet residential life of a street in a prosperous neighbourhood. This isn't the managed bustle of a commercial district. This is the particular chaos of a working-class London street in the full flower of the summer morning. And it has a texture and a smell and a sound that is completely its own. First, the pump. The Broad Street pump is maybe 40 feet from Mr. Coggins's shop on the west side of the street, and by 7 in the morning it already has a queue. That's not unusual, that's every morning. The pump serves hundreds of households in the immediate vicinity, and every one of those households needs water every day. For drinking, for cooking, for washing, for the dozen small necessities of daily life that all require water, and that water has to come from somewhere. It comes from the pump. The queue shifts and moves as people fill their buckets and jugs and bowls. You know most of the faces from 8 months of living on this street. Mrs. Hudson from number 8, a washerwoman with forearms thicker than most men's thighs, who fills 2 great buckets every morning and carries them both simultaneously without apparent effort. The Parelli children, 5 of them, ranging from about 4 to 12, from the Italian family who live in the basement of number 23, who are sent to the pump every morning before school and make the journey into an elaborate game involving the pump handle. The old man with no name that anyone knows, who lives in the room at the back of number 5 and appears at the pump at 7 sharp every morning with a single cup, fills it, drinks it on the spot, refills it, and carries it back inside. And the coffee stall. There's a coffee stall 20 yards from the pump, run by a man named Price, who has a cart and a spirit stove, and a great tin urn that he fills from the pump every morning at 6. A cup of coffee cost a halfpenny. Price sells maybe 200 cups a day to the workers, heading to the match factory and the distillery and the brewery and the various workshops and print shops and small manufacturers that make up Soho's industrial spine. Every cup of coffee Price sells is made with water from the Broad Street pump. You know this because you've bought coffee from Price approximately 4 times a week since March, when the weather got cold enough that the walk to the shop from the attic without a hot drink first seemed genuinely unwise. 200 cups a day, more in winter. From the pump. You don't think about where the water comes from. Nobody thinks about where the water comes from. It comes from the pump. The pump is on the street. The street is in London. London is a modern city that has solved the problem of being disgusting, hasn't it? You take the church notices down to Mr. Coggins for proofing at 8 o'clock, and he reads them with the flat, total attention he brings to everything. His finger traces each line without touching the paper. Apostrophe, he says. This is how he communicates errors. 1 word, never a complete sentence, the correction implied by the notation alone. You lean over his shoulder and see it. Sundays with an apostrophe, which it shouldn't have. I'll reset it. Yes. Anything else? He reads to the end. No. You take the notice back to the composing room. The error is in the 7th line of the 2nd column, which means you need to find the offending piece of type. There, the apostrophe sort, wedged between the Y and the S, where it absolutely should not be. Remove it. Close up the space. Reset the line. Lock the form back up. 3 minutes of work to fix a single apostrophe. This is the nature of the job. Perfection approached letter by letter. One wrong sort and the whole thing is wrong, because the press doesn't distinguish between what you meant to say and what you actually set. The press prints what's there. Your job is to make sure what's there is correct. Thomas once set an entire parliamentary report with a single upside-down capital N on the first page and didn't notice until the proof. Mr. Coggins made him reset every N in the entire document, all 112 of them. Not because they were upside down. The upside-down N had been corrected at proof stage. But because Mr. Coggins wanted Thomas to understand the weight of a single letter's error. The thing you get wrong at the beginning, Mr. Coggins said, with the economy of a man who's been explaining this for 30 years, echoes. Thomas says it echoes in his nightmares. By mid-morning, you're working on the political pamphlet with Thomas. Long sections of dense text about parliamentary committee findings on sanitation in London's poorer districts. Boring as only government language can be boring, but there's an irony in it that you won't appreciate until later. The pamphlet is arguing, in its careful, bureaucratic way, that something needs to be done about London's water supply, that the relationship between the condition of the water and the rates of disease in working-class districts is suggestive and requires investigation. Suggestive requires investigation. The pamphlet was written in 1853 and submitted to Parliament, and has been sitting in a queue of documents waiting to be printed since February. Outside your window, 40 feet away, the Broad Street pump is serving its 300th cup of water for the day. You set the type for the words contaminated water source and feel the click of each letter in your fingers and think about nothing except whether the A in contaminated is the right size variant. Lunchtime. You eat at the bench in the back of the print shop because eating at your composing case is forbidden. Mr. Coggins once found a crumb of bread stuck between two pieces of type in the lower case E compartment, and the resulting speech took 14 minutes by Thomas's account. And because the coffee shop next door is for spending money you don't have. Lunch is bread from the bakery on Berwick Street, bought this morning before work for a halfpenny, now somewhat squashed from being in your coat pocket all morning, and a small piece of hard cheese that has been in your coat pocket since yesterday and deserves better than this. Thomas has brought a pie from somewhere, a proper pie, the kind with real meat in it, or at least the memory of real meat. He eats it with the energy of a man who has earned it. Where did you get that, you ask? Mrs. Donahue on Poland Street. She does them Tuesdays and Thursdays. How much? 3p. 3p is too much. But you note the information for future reference. From outside, through the open back window, you can hear the particular midday version of Broad Street's noise, slightly louder than morning, the street sellers adding their voices to the general competition, the pump queue longer and slower because the women who manage morning queues have given way to afternoon queues, with children in them. A dog is barking somewhere on the opposite side of the street, the persistent mid-register bark of an animal with too much energy and too little space. Hot today, Thomas says. Hotter than yesterday? You agree. It has been hot all week. The kind of August heat that London does badly, close and thick and smelling of itself, the air barely moving between the tall buildings, the warmth pressing down from above and rising back up from the cobblestones until you're cooked from both sides. You don't know yet that heat is relevant to what's about to happen. You don't know yet that hot weather accelerates what the pump is already doing. You eat your squashed bread and your undeserving cheese and listen to the midday street. It starts with the Ely family. There is a percussion cap manufacturer on the west side of Broad Street, a firm called Ely Brothers, which makes ammunition components, specifically the percussion caps that go into the new rifles. It's not a large operation, but it employs maybe a dozen workers and the Ely family themselves, and they are respectable people, moderately prosperous, known to everyone on the street. You don't know the Ely family personally. They're several steps up the social scale from a printer's apprentice, but you know them by sight the way you know everyone on a street of 500 people. Mrs. Ely Sr. fills her water jug from the pump at 7 every morning, same as everyone else. Her grandson, a boy of maybe 7, small even for 7, always wearing a blue cap that looks too large for his head, runs between the factory and the house, on errands throughout the day, weaving between the adult's legs with the absolute conviction of a child who's never been seriously hurt, and therefore has no reason to believe he ever will be. On the evening of the 31st of August, the boy in the blue cap gets sick. You don't know this yet. You're upstairs in the attic at this point, lying on the rope bed in the strange transitional state between wakefulness and sleep that the end of a long working day induces. Too tired to read the penny paper you bought, not quite tired enough to actually surrender to sleep. Thomas is already unconscious. The gas lamp is out. Through the window, the late summer evening light is fading from orange to grey. The street sounds drift up. Someone is singing somewhere. A woman's voice, slightly flat, something you don't recognise. The pump handle creaks as it rises and falls. Even at this hour, people filling evening vessels. The distant sound of a horse on Wardour Street. The hollow knock of hooves on stone. A child crying, then stopping. You fall asleep. The first morning of September is a Thursday, and it begins the way every Thursday begins. Thomas oversleeps. You're at your case by the time Mr. Coggins arrives. The ink is distributed correctly, and the day's work is a continuation of the parliamentary pamphlet, and a new job. A batch of labels for a wine merchant on Oxford Street who wants 100 labels for a particular Burgundy that he is apparently importing in quantity. Labels are simple work. Once you've set the first one, you set the same type again and again, 100 times with only small variations. It's the compositorial equivalent of shelling peas. Not interesting, but the rhythm of it is almost meditative, and you can let your hands do their work while your mind does something else. What your mind does this morning is go over the letter from Wiltshire again. You should write back. You've been meaning to write back since the letter arrived, and you've drafted the reply in your head approximately 15 times. But the act of actually sitting down with paper and ink and writing it requires an emotional clarity you haven't managed to locate. There's a version of the letter that says, "Don't worry, I'm sure it's nothing," and a version that says, "Should I come home?" and neither of them feels quite right. You're halfway through label number 37 when you hear Mrs. Hudson's voice from the street through the open window, raised, urgent, not her normal voice. Something in the tone of it makes your hands stop. You go to the window. Mrs. Hudson is in the street below talking to the woman from the coffee shop. You don't know her name, just her apron and her copper-red hair. And the exchange has the body language of bad news being passed on. Hunched toward each other, the coffee shop woman's hand going to her mouth. Thomas looks up from his case. What's happening? Not sure. You watch for another moment. Someone's ill, maybe. Someone's always ill. Sit down. You go back to your case. Label 38, 39. But you keep glancing at the window. By midday, the news has reached the shop. Mrs. Hudson comes in to deliver a notice. She acts as a kind of informal newspaper for the street, carrying information between households the way the Thames carries sediment, thoroughly and without discrimination. And she tells Mr. Coggins that the Ellie boy was taken badly ill last night, and that there's another 2 houses on the south end of the street where people are sick. A family called Susanna Ely herself, the formidable queue-occupying widow, had apparently sent a message to her son to say she was feeling poorly. What kind of ill? Mr. Coggins asks. The gut kind, Mrs. Hudson says, with the direct vocabulary of a woman who has no patience for euphemism. Vomiting and worse. Violent. 3 of them in one night. Mr. Coggins's face doesn't move, but his hands, which have been holding a galley proof, go still. How many households? He asks. 3 that I know of. A pause. 3 in one night, Mr. Coggins says. Yes, sir. He's quiet for a moment. Thank you, Mrs. Hudson, he says, and his voice is even, and Mrs. Hudson nods and leaves. You look at Thomas. Thomas looks at you. Is that... Thomas starts. I don't know, you say, but Mr. Coggins has gone back to his proof, and his face tells you nothing, and you go back to your labels. You set the 40th label, you set the 41st. Your mind is no longer on Wiltshire. I need to stop here and tell you something about how people in 1854 understood disease, because it shapes everything that happens next, and if you don't understand it, the tragedy of the next few weeks won't make sense. In 1854, the dominant theory of how diseases like cholera spread is called miasma theory. Miasma is a Greek word meaning pollution or bad air, and the theory says exactly what it sounds like, that diseases spread through the air, that the particular smell of rotting organic matter, the stench of sewage, of decaying waste, of London's rivers and courts and cesspits, actually is the disease. That breathing the bad air is how you get sick. This theory has been around since ancient times and has the advantage of explaining a lot of things plausibly. Diseases do tend to be worse in places that smell bad. They do tend to be worse near standing water and sewage. The correlation is real, even if the causation is completely wrong. The problem, for the purposes of our story, is that this theory is catastrophically incorrect, and its incorrectness is going to get a lot of people killed over the next few weeks. Because if you believe miasma theory, the response to cholera is open the windows, improve ventilation, clean up the smells. And this response, while not useless, cleaner conditions do reduce disease transmission in various indirect ways, completely misses the actual mechanism. Which is the water? Which is the pump? There is a doctor living in Soho at this time. His name is John Snow, and he is 40 years old, and he is considered a slightly eccentric figure by many of his colleagues. He's brilliant. He invented modern anaesthesia, essentially, and was present at the birth of Queen Victoria's 8th child. But he has some unconventional ideas about disease. Specifically, he doesn't believe in miasma theory. He thinks cholera spreads through contaminated water. He's been thinking this for years. He published a paper on it in 1849. Nobody particularly agreed with him. He lives at number 18, Sackville Street, which is about 10 minutes from Broad Street. When the outbreak begins, when the first cases appear on the evening of August 31st, John Snow is the person who is going to pay the closest attention. But right now, on this first day of September, while you're setting wine labels in Mr. Coggins's composing room and trying not to think about Wiltshire, John Snow doesn't know about the outbreak yet. The outbreak doesn't know about itself yet. It has just arrived, the way most catastrophes arrive. Not with announcement, not with warning, just with the sudden presence of sick people who are not sick yesterday. You wake up on the 1st of September to a different sound from the street. It takes you a moment to identify what's different. Then you get it. The pump queue is louder. More people, more voices. The particular anxious energy of people talking urgently while they wait for something ordinary. You stand at the window in the early morning and look down. The queue at the pump is longer than usual. This doesn't make immediate sense to you. You'd have thought that if people knew their neighbours were ill, and on Broad Street everyone always knows everything about their neighbours, they'd be more careful, not less. But the opposite seems to be happening. The pump queue is longer because people are fetching more water. Sick people need water. Washing things down, cleaning things out, the instinct toward cleanliness that surfaces in the face of illness. Get more water. Clean more. That will help. That will not help. You don't know this yet. You go downstairs and splash water on your face from the basin. The water is from yesterday's pump run. It's slightly warm from sitting overnight, slightly stale tasting. You drink the last inch of it because you're thirsty and you haven't yet fetched today's water, and the water from the basin has always been fine. Fine so far. That's what you'd say if you were asked. Fine so far. 3 more households ill by morning. That's what Mrs. Donahue from Poland Street says, stopping by the print shop at 7:30, with a tone of voice that has added extra weight since yesterday. She's a round woman with a talent for information and a compulsion to share it, and she knows everything about everyone within a quarter-mile radius by some process that might be social or might be supernatural. The family at number 6, she says, lowering her voice as if the numbers themselves might be listening. Both children ill last night, and the Connolly woman at number 14, her whole house apparently. Whole house, Mr. Coggin says. 6 people, all sick by midnight. A household of 6 people, all sick, in one night. That is fast. You know enough about how illness usually works, the slow creep of a winter cold, the gradual decline of a fever, to know that 6 people sick in one night is not ordinary. That is something moving through a space like fire through dry grass. Is it, you hesitate, is it cholera? Mrs. Donahue gives you the look people give someone who's named the thing that everyone is thinking. Half gratitude, half accusation. The doctor's been called, she says. We'll know more later. She leaves. Mr. Coggins goes back to his proof. His hands are still. Thomas and you exchange a look. Cholera. The word sits in the composing room like a piece of badly set type. You know the shape of it, the general meaning. It's been in the newspapers for years. The great epidemics, the reports from India, the outbreaks in the East End in 1832 and 1848. You've set the word cholera in type before, in the parliamentary pamphlet, in various articles. You know what it means in the abstract. The abstract and the 40 feet to the pump are very different distances. We should get our water from a different source today, Thomas says. Mr. Coggins, you say. He looks up. Should we avoid the pump? He's quiet for a moment. Then, we'll use the cask in the cellar. I'll fill it from the New River Company pipe on Wardour Street. He says this calmly, as if it's a perfectly ordinary logistical adjustment, as if it means nothing in particular, but the 3 of you stand in the composing room for a moment, not moving, and the sound of the pump cue is clearly audible through the window, and nobody says what they're all thinking. I need to tell you what cholera actually is, because the language of it matters. Cholera is caused by a bacterium, Vibrio cholerae, that, when swallowed in contaminated water, colonizes the small intestine and begins producing a toxin. That toxin causes the intestinal cells to secrete fluid at an extraordinary rate. The body begins to lose water faster than anything except direct hemorrhage. A severe case of cholera can kill an adult human being through dehydration in as little as 6 hours. 6 hours. The symptoms begin with watery diarrhea, sudden, uncontrollable, voluminous, then vomiting. Then the dehydration begins to show in the body itself. The skin becomes dry and inelastic, the eyes sink, the hands turn blue-grey and wrinkled, the face takes on a hollow, caved-in look that Victorians call the faces of cholera, and that once you've seen you recognise immediately. The body cools, the blood thickens, the kidneys shut down. If you can replace the fluids, if you can force someone to keep drinking, keep replacing what they're losing, the body can fight the bacterium eventually. The immune system can handle it. But in 1854, nobody knows this. The treatment is everything from laudanum to brandy to the application of mustard plasters to the chest, none of which are particularly helpful, and some of which make things worse. The bacterium is in the water, you drink the water, you get sick, you die, sometimes in the same day you first felt ill. This is what is moving through Broad Street at the speed of a pump cue. You go out at noon to buy bread from the Berwick Street bakery, and the street is different. It's difficult to say exactly how. These same buildings, this same noise. But there is a quality to the movement of people that is altered somehow, a quickness. The women at the pump queue not chatting the way they usually chat, not the relaxed sociability of a daily ritual, but something tighter, more purposeful. Get the water, get inside. The door of number 6 is closed. Usually it's open on warm days. Mrs. Ferrara, who lives there, keeps it open to catch the breeze from the street, and you often see her children sitting on the step in the afternoon. The step is empty. The door is closed. You notice as you walk past a shape at the upper window, someone looking out, face blurred by the glass watching the street. You don't stop. The bakery is busy. The baker, Mr. Walsh, a large Irish man with flour permanently in his hair, seems normal, cheerful, selling bread with his usual efficiency. You buy your loaf, get your change, a penny back from 2p, and are halfway to the door when a woman behind you says quietly to her companion, "The little Ely boy." Her companion says, "When?" "This morning. Early." A pause. "He was 7. You stop walking. The Ely boy. The boy in the blue cap who ran between the factory and the house, who weaved between legs on the street, who had the total physical confidence of a child who has never been seriously hurt. He was sick yesterday morning. He is dead this morning, in under 24 hours. You walk back to the print shop very quickly. He comes to Broad Street on the 2nd of September, which is a Saturday. You see him first from the window of the composing room. A man of about 40, compact, walking quickly, carrying a notebook and a small leather bag. He is well dressed without being ostentatious. Good coat, good boots, the kind of clothing that says respectable professional without saying wealthy. His face has a focused, slightly intense quality, like someone who is both paying close attention to what's in front of him and simultaneously running several calculations in the background. He stops at the pump. This is interesting to you for no reason you could articulate. He stops at the pump the way everyone stops at the pump. It's in the middle of the street. You naturally stop there when you're walking past. But he looks at it differently. He looks at it with a particular attention that you have learned to recognise from Mr. Coggins examining a suspicious proof. The look that says, "Something is wrong here, and I intend to find out what." He takes out his notebook and writes something. Then he looks up and down the street slowly, methodically, and writes something else. You realise you've stopped setting type and are just standing at the window watching him. "What are you looking at?" Thomas asks. "There's a doctor outside." There have been 4 doctors on this street since Thursday. "This one's looking at the pump." Thomas comes to the window. The 2 of you watch the man write something else in his notebook. Look at the pump again, then walk in the direction of number 40, the house at the south end of the street that had the worst concentration of cases as far as you've heard. "Probably just noting where the cases are," Thomas says. "Probably." But you watch until he turns the corner. Later you'll learn who he is. Not that day. That day you're just a printer's apprentice watching a man with a notebook, without the context to make the observation meaningful. The context will come later, piece by piece, from conversations in doorways and reports in the penny papers, and eventually from the man himself, because you do speak to him eventually, but not yet. Saturday evening. The numbers are becoming impossible to ignore. By Saturday evening, the word moving through Broad Street is not 3 households or 6 households anymore. The word is 70 people. 70 people sick since Thursday night. 70 people in 3 days on a street of 500. That's 1 in 7. That's not an outbreak. You don't have the word for what it is. You've never encountered something that moves like this. Disease, in your experience, is personal. Your father's slow cough. A winter fever that keeps you in bed for 3 days. The occasional case of something that makes the rounds through a community over weeks and months. It has a pace to it, a human pace. This has no human pace. This is moving at the pace of the water. Every family that fills a bucket at the pump, every coffee cup Price sells from his urn, every glass of water drunk at the distillery at the south end of the street where the workers drink pump water all day because the distillery provides it, every cup given to a sick person to rehydrate them. The sick person gets sicker. The person who fetches the water to give to the sick person gets sick. The pump is the mechanism, the pump is the wheel. And it's still running. Mr. Coggins closes the shop early on Saturday. This is unprecedented. Mr. Coggins does not close the shop early. Mr. Coggins closes the shop at the time the shop closes, which is the time that it has always closed and will continue to close until such time as Mr. Coggins decides differently. He closes early on Saturday. He doesn't explain. He just locks the printing press, covers the ink, checks the gas lights and says, "We're done for today." Thomas and you look at each other. "Sir," Thomas says, "is everything?" "We're done for today," Mr. Coggins says again, and his voice has the quality of a sentence that does not have a second sentence coming after it. You go upstairs to the attic. Through the window, you can see the street, which is quieter than usual for a Saturday evening. Normally, Saturday evenings on Broad Street are alive with it. The week's work done, the week's wage spent or being spent, music from the tavern on the corner, children still outside after dark making the most of the warm evening. Tonight, fewer people. The pub is open, but not full. The pump queue has dwindled to almost nothing. Whether that means people are afraid of the pump, or whether it means they're all indoors already with the people who've gotten sick, you can't tell. You can see a faint light in the window of number 6, still closed. Thomas is lying on the bed, hands behind his head, staring at the ceiling. "What do you think it is?" he says. "You know what it is." People keep saying that word. "Yes." A pause. "My cousin was in the 48 outbreak," Thomas says. "Bermondsey. He said it was..." He stops. "He said it was very fast." "Yes," you say again. The sounds from the street are wrong. Tonight. The particular wrongness of too much silence where there should be sound. Like a mechanism that's been running and has suddenly paused, not from completion, but from damage. You lie down. Your body is tired. Your hands ache in the specific way that comes from 10 hours of delicate motor work. A deep ache in the tendons of your right hand, particularly the thumb and the first 2 fingers that do the picking and placing. Your shoulders are tight from the slight, constant forward lean of standing at the case. You're too alert to sleep. The street below is quiet, not the peaceful quiet of a street at rest, the brittle quiet of a street that is afraid. The shops are closed on Sunday. Mr. Coggins is at church. He goes, unerringly, every Sunday morning. St. Anne's on Dean Street, 8 o'clock service, back by 10. He's not a man who adjusts his habits for epidemics. You and Thomas have the morning to yourselves. You should go to church too. The terms of your apprenticeship include a nominal requirement for Sunday worship, and St. James's Piccadilly is close enough. But the printed terms and the actual practice diverge on this, as they do on several things, and Mr. Coggins has never checked. This morning, you're not going to church, and neither is Thomas, and neither of you says anything about it, and instead you both step out into the street at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning and face what Broad Street has become. The street is very quiet. Not Sunday morning quiet, which has its own particular character, the space left by the absence of commerce, the church bells organising the silence into something meaningful. This is a different kind of quiet. The quietness of people staying inside. The quietness of curtains drawn at 9 in the morning on a sunny day. The pump is unattended. In 8 months you have never seen the pump unattended in daylight hours. There is always someone at the pump in daylight hours. It's as basic a fixture of the street as the buildings on either side of it. Today the pump handle is still. The street around it is empty. Thomas pulls his coat slightly tighter, though it isn't cold. I heard 4 more last night, he says. 4 more sick? 4 more dead. His voice is very flat when he says this. Mrs. Hudson told me through the window when I went to look out at about midnight, said she could hear crying from number 8. 4 dead in a single night, and 4 more sick. And 4 more filling their water buckets from the pump yesterday, because they believed in the theory that clean water should look clean, should taste clean, should smell clean. And the Broad Street pump's water looks fine, tastes fine, smells fine. It is not brown. It does not smell foul. It has no characteristics that say poison to the eyes and nose. It kills you anyway. We should leave, Thomas says. You look at him. We should leave the street. Go somewhere else. Come back when it's over. We can't leave. Why? The apprenticeship. To hell with the apprenticeship. We can come back when it's over. People are dying, William. You stand in the empty street and look at the still pump handle and think about this. Where would we go? Thomas opens his mouth and closes it. He doesn't have anywhere to go. His people are in Bristol. Getting to Bristol takes time and money, and the railway fare is something he doesn't have liquid. And the concept of simply appearing on his family's doorstep, having left his position without notice, has obvious difficulties. Your people are in Wiltshire. The same problem, amplified by the added complication of your father being ill, and the last thing you want to do is appear in a household where someone is already sick while potentially carrying something. You stand in the street for a moment. We use the cask water, you say. The water from Wardour Street. We don't go near the pump. We stay inside as much as possible. Thomas is quiet. And if it gets worse, you start. If it gets worse, we leave. If it gets worse, we leave. You agree. It gets worse. On Sunday afternoon, John Snow comes back to Broad Street. This time you see him clearly because you are outside, having gone to buy bread from the bakery on Berwick Street, which is still open, Mr. Walsh apparently having decided that an epidemic was no reason to stop selling bread, which is either admirable or concerning, probably both. And you're coming back along Broad Street when you almost walk into him. He's standing at the pump again with his notebook, but this time he's also talking to people. There's a woman from the street. You recognise her. She's from number 20, one of the houses that hasn't had cases yet, and he's asking her questions. You slow down to listen from a distance of about 10 feet, in the way that city people slow down to watch something interesting, while maintaining the technical plausibility of just passing through. How long have you been? Getting your water from this pump, he's saying. The woman, years. Everyone does. And when did you last fill your jug here? Yesterday morning. I always fill it in the morning. And the evening before? Thursday evening, she thinks. I don't think so. I was out Thursday evening. He writes something down. And in your household, has anyone been ill? No, thank God. He writes something else. His face is very focused, very still, and you have the sense of someone running a calculation, not visibly, not ostentatiously, just quietly processing. Thank you, he says. One more question. Have you noticed anything unusual about the water from this pump recently? The taste, the smell? She shakes her head. Same as always. He thanks her and she goes inside and he stands there a moment, looking at the pump, and then he looks up and sees you watching him. You don't look away. You've been noticed, and the window for pretending otherwise has closed. You live on this street? He says. Yes, sir, number 12. I'm an apprentice to Mr. Coggins, the printer. He looks at you with the same focused, processing attention he's been giving to the pump. Then he opens his notebook. Have you or anyone in your household been ill? No, sir. Where do you get your water? We use a cask. Mr. Coggins has it filled from the new river company on Wardour Street. Something shifts in his expression. Not quite excitement. It's too controlled for that. But a sharpening of attention. Since when? Since, you think. Since Friday morning, after we heard about the cases. And before Friday? The pump. Same as everyone. And you were last at the pump when? Wednesday evening, I think. Fetching for Thursday morning. He writes all of this down with a quick, precise hand. Then he looks up. Are you healthy? No gut trouble? No nausea? No, sir. Both of us at the shop. The 2 apprentices and Mr. Coggins. He nods slowly. You changed your water source on Friday, he says, almost to himself. And you've all stayed well. Yes, sir. The cases all began Thursday night, he says. Everyone who's been ill, as far as I can tell, has been drinking from this pump. He looks at it. Have you ever heard anyone say anything negative about this pump? About the taste or quality of the water? No, sir. Everyone I know has always said it's good water. That's what everyone says. He's still looking at the pump. That's the interesting thing. You stand there for a moment. A printer's apprentice and a doctor in an empty street on a Sunday afternoon, and the pump handle still between them. What do you think it is, you ask? The pump, I mean. What's wrong with it? He looks at you. Something in his expression suggests he's deciding how much to say. I think the water is contaminated, he says. Not from the air, from the source. Something is in the water itself that is causing the illness. Not the miasma. No. He says it with calm finality, the way you say things you've been arguing for years and are entirely certain of. Not the miasma. The air doesn't cause cholera, the water does. You look at the pump that everyone on this street drinks from, has been drinking from, for years. How do you prove it, you ask? He almost smiles. That's the question, isn't it? That's exactly the question. He closes his notebook. Stay off the pump, he says. Tell anyone who'll listen to stay off the pump. And if anyone asks why, tell them Dr. John Snow believes the water is making people sick. He walks down toward the south end of the street. You watch him go. Then you go back to the print shop with your bread, and you stand in the composing room and you look out the window at the pump and you think, he knows something. I need you to understand what the week of September 4th through the 8th, 1854, is like on Broad Street. I need you to actually understand it, not just receive the numbers, because the numbers are real. Numbers attached to real people, and the numbers alone will not tell you what it felt like to be on that street. 56 people die in the first 3 days. Not 56 total, 56 in 3 days. By the time the week is out, the number will be over 100. The final total for the outbreak will be 616 deaths. 616 people on a single street drawing from a single pump, Monday morning, back to work. The routine is the right thing. The routine is the only thing. Mr. Coggins seems to have decided this, or maybe he just can't conceive of an alternative, and so the shop opens at its proper time, and the type cases are uncovered, and the gas lamp is lit, and the three of you take your places at the case and pick up where you left off. The parliamentary pamphlet, the wine labels, a new job, a small one, a memorial notice for a family in Bloomsbury, a father dead at 54, the notice to be printed and distributed to the family's acquaintances. You set it with the particular care that death deserves. The name in capitals, the dates correct, the words your employer wrote for the notice, beloved husband and father, called to his rest in the certainty of resurrection, treated with the same precision you'd give to anything else, because the family will see this and it will outlast all of you. You're halfway through the memorial notice when you hear the weeping from the street. You've heard weeping on this street before. Urban streets are not private, and grief in 1854 doesn't really have anywhere else to go except into the communal air. But this is different. This is not one person. This is coming from the direction of number 6, the Ferrara house, the one that's been closed since Thursday, and it has the particular raw quality of grief that hasn't yet learned to moderate itself. You keep setting type, the click of metal on metal, the small, precise sounds of your trade, pick, place, pick, place. Outside, the weeping continues for a while and then stops. Thomas doesn't come in that afternoon. He sends word, a note delivered by the boy from the bakery, who is doing a brisk trade in messages now that no one wants to knock on doors, that he's not well. Mr. Coggins reads the note. His face does something you can't quite name. Is it the... You start. It says he has a headache and general malaise, Mr. Coggins says. Not the gut trouble. He pauses. It may be nothing. It may be nothing. You go back to work alone. The composing room without Thomas is a different room. Quieter, obviously, but also somehow larger in a way that has nothing to do with physics. You set type. You pull a proof. You correct 3 errors in the memorial notice and reset those lines. You don't think about Thomas. You think about the water. Thomas drinks the cask water. Mr. Coggins filled the cask from Wardour Street on Friday. Thomas has not been to the pump since at least Wednesday. The same as you. It may be nothing. Thomas has a headache and general malaise for 24 hours and then is fully recovered and back at his case on Wednesday, looking slightly pale but functional, and you feel the release of a tension you hadn't fully acknowledged as tension until it resolved. He brings a pie from Mrs. Donahue. You eat it in the back room without much conversation. I thought it might be the cholera, he says eventually. I know. I thought... He stops. I thought about it. You don't say anything. I had 12 hours of thinking I were going to die, he says, which is probably nothing compared to actually dying of it, obviously, but he looks at his hands, which are ink-stained and calloused and familiar. I thought about Bristol, about whether I'd got to send word in time. You should send word anyway, you say, even now, just to say you're all right. He nods. I should send word home too, you say. Both of you sit in the kitchen with the remains of the pie. Between you, and neither of you writes anything because writing it makes it real in a different way. On Wednesday, the 6th of September, you go out to deliver a package, a completed print run for a stationer's on Carnaby Street, and the route takes you down Broad Street and you see the doors, the closed doors, not just number 6, not just the ones you already knew about, closed doors up and down the street on both sides, and not just closed. Some of them have the particular quality of closed that means nobody is coming to open them. a stillness that is different from the stillness of a house where people are inside going about their lives, a silence that is the wrong kind of silence. A street of 500 people is emptying. Not all of them are dead. Some of them have done what Thomas suggested on Sunday morning, packed up and left, gone to relatives, gone to lodgings elsewhere, gone anywhere that doesn't have a pump handle on the corner. The area around Broad Street is developing a particular reputation, the kind of reputation that travels at speed through the interconnected nervous system of a city. Stay away from Broad Street. People are leaving, and people are dying. You count closed doors on your way to Carnaby Street. You count 7 on the east side of the street and 5 on the west side. 12 houses closed on one day on one street. You complete your delivery. The stationer accepts the package with his normal efficiency, and you walk back through the summer streets of Soho, which smell today like they always smell. Coal smoke, horse dung, food, people, except that you are now aware of what those smells do and don't tell you, which is that they tell you nothing. The miasma theory is wrong. The bad smell is not the disease. The sweet-smelling pump is the disease. You walk back along Broad Street and look at the pump as you pass it. It's in use. A woman, you don't recognise her, possibly from a street nearby, is filling a large jug, pumping the handle with both hands, the water flowing clear and clean-looking into the ceramic. You stop. "Excuse me," you say. She looks at you. "That water, I wouldn't use that pump if I were you. There's a doctor who believes it's contaminated, that it's causing the illness." She looks at you the way people look at someone saying something that doesn't fit with their understanding of how the world works. The look that's not quite disbelief and not quite dismissal, but the combination of both. "The water looks fine," she says. "I know, but I've been drinking from this pump for 10 years. I know, but..." She lifts her full jug and walks away. You watch her go. There's nothing more you can do. You don't have credentials. You don't have Jon Snow's notebook. You're a printer's apprentice, 17 years old, telling a woman something that contradicts everything she knows from experience. You go back to the print shop. On September 7th, Jon Snow presents his map to the Board of Guardians. The map. This is the thing he's been building all these days with his notebook, all these conversations at doorways, all these questions. Where did you get your water? When did you last drink from the pump? Who else in your household is ill? He has mapped every death on the street, every single one, marked them on a chart of the neighbourhood, a dot for each death, overlaid on the street plan, the houses, the pumps. The map is absolutely clear. Every dot is clustered around the Broad Street pump. Every single one. Death thin out the farther you get from that specific pump and thicken, cluster, mass, concentrate within 100 yards of it. There are exceptions. There are houses near the pump with no deaths. There is a workhouse, St. James's Workhouse, right around the corner, with 500 inmates and almost no cholera cases. There is a brewery on Broad Street whose workers have no cases at all. Snow investigates these exceptions. They make the case. The workhouse has its own water supply. It doesn't use the pump. The brewery, Huggins's Brewery, provides its workers with beer instead of water. They don't drink from the pump because they drink beer all day, not water. Beer. That's the irony of this particular story. The workers who are drunk are safe. The ones who are sober and drinking clean-tasting water from the pump are dying. Snow presents all of this to the Board of Guardians. The board looks at the map. They're not entirely convinced. The miasma theory doesn't give up easily, and the evidence, while suggestive, is still circumstantial in ways that allow doubt. But Snow is persuasive. and he's persistent, and the map is very hard to argue with when you're looking at it. On September 8th, 1854, the Board of Guardians votes to remove the handle from the Broad Street pump. You are at your composing case when Thomas says, from the window, "They're taking the pump apart." You go to the window. There are 3 men in the street. Official looking, you can tell by the way they're standing, which is the particular stance of people who have been authorised to do something that other people might object to. One of them has a wrench. They detach the pump handle. It takes about 2 minutes. The handle comes off. One of the men lifts it, and it's just an iron bar, maybe 3 feet long, heavy, and he carries it away. Another man puts something, a board, a piece of covering, over the pump spigot. The pump is done. The street is very quiet. Mrs. Hudson is watching from her window. You can see her face, sharp, watching, not crying, just watching. The men finish and leave. The pump stands there without its handle, like a piece of furniture missing a leg. The stone basin, the iron post, the empty place where the handle was, pointing at nothing now. You stand at the window for a long time. Thomas goes back to his case. You hear the click of type behind you. You don't go back. Immediately, you stand and look at the pump. The pump without its handle cannot deliver water. The pump without its handle is just a post in the street. The disease cannot spread through a pump that nobody can operate. Somewhere between the wall of the pump housing and the soil beneath Broad Street, 12 feet away from a leaking cesspit, Vibrio cholerae is in the water table. Has been in it probably for weeks. Long enough to have already done what it's going to do. Long enough for the 100 people who are already dead to be already dead. But the handle is gone. And over the coming days, slowly, with the terrible slowness of a process that cannot be hurried, the cases will stop. Not immediately. People who are already sick continue to be sick. People who drank from the pump in the last 48 hours will still get sick. The disease has momentum that a removed handle can't instantly stop, but it stops increasing, and then it stops. You wake up the next morning, September 9th, and the first thing you do is go to the window. The pump is still there, still without its handle. The street is quiet, quieter than it was even a week ago, because by now approximately half the residents of Broad Street have either died or left. The summer morning light comes in gold and flat off the rooftops of the buildings opposite, and the street below is so empty that you can see the cobblestones properly, the individual stones, the gaps between them, the gutter that runs along the centre where refuse collects. You don't usually see the individual stones. There are usually too many people. You stand at the window for a long time. Thomas stirs behind you. "Is it still gone?" he asks. He means the handle. "Still gone." He's quiet. "How many do you think?" he asks. "In total?" You've been trying not to add up the numbers you've heard. The daily reports pass through doorways, through notes, through Mrs. Hudson and Mrs. Donahue and Mr. Walsh at the bakery. 3 here, 5 there. 2 more last night. It accumulates. "I don't know," you say. "More than 100, I think." Thomas is quiet. Outside, the street begins its modified, reduced version of what it used to be. Fewer people, but people. The bakery opens. You can smell it from here. The bread smell cutting through everything else, reliable as anything. A cat crosses the empty street with the deliberate focus of an animal that has decided the street's new quietness is an opportunity. "We should go out today," Thomas says. "To where?" "Anywhere. Just out. Walk somewhere." You think about this. The logic of staying indoors for the past week has been more instinct than reason. You still have to go out for deliveries, for bread, for the necessary transactions of daily life. But there has been a drawing in quality to your existence lately that is partly fear and partly something harder to name. A desire to stay within the known perimeter. We could walk to Regent's Park, you say. Thomas thinks about it. Not enough distance. Primrose Hill. Primrose Hill. That's farther, north of Regent's Park, a proper climb up to a high point above the city. You've never been there. Thomas has once, when he first arrived in London and was still in the phase of treating it as a tourist destination rather than a place to live. After work, you say? After work. It's 3 miles from Broad Street to Primrose Hill, and you walk it in the early evening after the shop closes at 5. The route takes you north through the cluttered streets of Soho and Fitzrovia, past the hospitals, past the terraced houses that get gradually larger and less battered as you move away from the dense centre, past the edges of Regent's Park where the trees begin, and then up. The hill itself is not dramatic. It rises maybe 200 feet above the surrounding ground. But London is flat, and 200 feet is enough. By the time you reach the top, your legs are complaining about the ascent. After a day of standing, and your shoes, the one with the cracked heel, have let in enough of the dew from the grass to make your left sock wet, which is unpleasant in a specific and irremediable way. Thomas is slightly ahead because Thomas is 19 and has proportionally more energy than you at this particular moment, and he's reached the summit and stopped and is looking south. You come up beside him. London is below you. This is the thing about standing at height above a city you live inside. You live inside it as a series of immediate experiences. This street, this smell, this building, this queue at this pump. The city is always close, always in your face, always making demands. You don't experience it as a whole because you can never see it as a whole. You see it in fragments, street by street, turn by turn. From here, the fragments reassemble. The Thames curves through the middle of it, catching the evening light like a strip of hammered tin. To the south and west, the dome of St. Paul's rises, Wren's dome, finished 150 years ago, still the highest point in the city, still visible from most of London. You've stood beneath it, have looked up at the stone from the street level where it fills your entire field of vision and seems too massive to be real. From here, it's a small grey half-sphere in the middle of a sea of rooftops. And the rooftops, thousands of them, tens of thousands. The uniform dark grey and brown of London's roofscape, punctuated by chimneys. How many chimneys? You can't count them. They go on to the edge of visibility and probably beyond. The smoke from them rises in thin threads that merge above the city into a single haze. The permanent grey ceiling that London generates by simply existing. You can see where the old city is. You can tell by the density, the age of the buildings visible even from this distance. You can pick out the area of Soho, though you can't distinguish Broad Street specifically, just a region of the city compressed by distance to a texture on a surface. That's where the pump is. Somewhere in that mass of streets and buildings, a foot of iron post with no handle, standing in a street that has lost 100 of its people in 10 days. You can't see it from here. It's lost in the city. It's big, Thomas says, not brilliantly but accurately. Yes. I keep forgetting how big it is. You stand there in the evening air, genuinely clean air up here. The coal smoke thinned by altitude and by being outside the city's densest core. And look at the thing you live inside. 2.5 million people. the largest city on Earth in 1854, the centre of an empire that genuinely does reach around the world, that has ships in every ocean, outposts on every continent, that is in the process of changing the economic structure of the entire planet, and is occasionally aware of this in a self-congratulatory way, and mostly just getting on with it. The centre of all that is what you live inside. The streets and the pump and the composing room and the attic with the rope bed and Thomas's bony knee. They'll fix it, Thomas says. Eventually, the water, they'll sort it out properly. Someone has to tell them what to fix. Snow's doing that. I know. You think of the man with the notebook in the empty street. He's doing that. The light is getting lower, the sun dropping toward the edge of the city, turning the haze above the Thames copper orange. Long shadows stretch out from the trees on the hill behind you. My father used to talk about London, you say, when I was small. He'd been once, just the once, for a cattle market. He came back and said it was the most terrifying place he'd ever been in his life. Thomas laughs. He said it was like standing inside a machine, you continue, like everything was moving all at once and nothing was going to stop for you. He wasn't wrong. No. You look at the city below, but it doesn't feel like that anymore. It just feels like where I am. Thomas is quiet for a moment. We should write home, he says. Yes. Tonight even. Yes. The sun continues its descent. The city below gets its evening colours, the particular warm light that turns even grimy London beautiful for about 40 minutes before dark, that catches the windows and the wet cobblestones and the curve of the river and makes the whole thing look, for a moment, like something from a painting rather than something you have to live inside. You stand on the hill and look at it. Below you, in the streets that are too distant to see properly, John Snow is adding another day's data to his map. The Board of Guardians has the pump handle. The outbreak is beginning, just beginning slowly, to slow. 600 people are going to die before it's over, but it's going to be over. We should go back, Thomas says. In a minute, you say. One more minute looking at the city that has done this to itself and is in the process of learning something that it should have known already but didn't, couldn't, because it believed the wrong thing about how the world worked, because it trusted its nose instead of its logic, because the pump water tasted clean. One more minute. Then you turn away from the view and start down the hill toward the streets, toward the composing room and the rope bed and the type cases full of their small metal soldiers, toward the tomorrow that is coming whether you're ready for it or not. There is a complication in Jon Snow's investigation that I want to tell you about, because it's the part of the story that most people leave out, and it matters. Snow's map is convincing, but it has holes in it. Specifically, there is a case that appears to contradict his theory. A woman named Sarah Lewis lives on Thomas Street, just south of Broad Street, and her baby died of cholera on the 2nd of September. But Sarah Lewis doesn't use the Broad Street pump. She uses a different one, closer to her home. How did the baby get cholera? A man named Henry Whitehead finds the answer. Whitehead is the curate of St. Luke's Church, just around the corner from Broad Street, and he's a remarkable person. He's 29 years old, has lived in the area his whole life, knows virtually everyone on every street in his parish. When the outbreak begins, he decides to investigate it himself, partly because he thinks Snow is wrong, actually. He's a miasma man initially. He believes the bad air is causing it. But Whitehead is, above all else, honest. He follows the evidence where it goes, even when it goes somewhere he didn't expect. He goes to Sarah Lewis and asks her about the baby, and Sarah Lewis tells him that the baby had diarrhea on the 28th of August. 3 days before the outbreak is usually said to have begun, 3 days before the LA boy got sick, 3 days before anyone was counting cases. And she tells him that she poured the soiled napkins into the cesspit at the front of the house, the cesspit that runs alongside the wall of the house on Thomas Street. Whitehead measures the distances. The cesspit is 3 feet from the pipe that feeds the Broad Street pump. 3 feet. The baby had cholera, probably caught from somewhere else, some already circulating strain. And the soiled water from the napkins soaked through 3 feet of soil and got into the water supply. 1 sick baby and 3 feet of permeable soil. That's it. That's how it started. 616 people, 1 sick baby, and 3 feet. You learn this later, months later, when the full story comes out and makes its way into the newspapers and gets set in type in composing rooms across the city, including eventually Mr. Coggin's composing room, where you're the one who sets the article about Jon Snow's investigation, picking the letters that spell out contaminated water and cesspit and pump and handle removed and reading the story as you compose it, word by word, letter by letter, in the slow, intimate way that compositors know text before anyone else does. You set the story of your own street. You set the story of the pump that stood 40 feet from where you work. The click of the letters going into the stick has a different quality that day, like you're holding something heavier than usual, like the lead has more weight. October comes and the outbreak is over. The final cases are in mid-September. After the handle is removed, the numbers fall quickly. Much more quickly than anyone expected, actually, because the water was doing so much of the work, and without the water, the disease loses most of its mechanism. There are still cases from other sources, still the general background level of disease that London always carries, but the specific catastrophe of Broad Street is done. 616 dead, and now the street has to figure out what to do with the aftermath. Some of the people who left come back, some don't. Number 6 stays empty through October and into November. The Ferrara family, you find out through Mrs. Hudson, have moved to somewhere in Lambeth across the river. Won't come back to Broad Street. Can you blame them? The other houses are occupied by new people who arrive knowing nothing about August, or knowing the outline but not the texture, the statistic without the experience. They move in and put their furniture up the stairs and begin fetching their water from the pump whose handle has been put back. This is the thing that breaks your brain slightly when you think about it. The handle is put back. In early October, after the outbreak is declared over, the parish authorities decide the pump can be reopened. The water has been examined, it looks clean, the obvious signs of contamination are gone, and the cesspit that probably caused the problem has been sealed, so the handle goes back on, and people drink from it again. Jon Snow is not happy about this. Snow has published his analysis, has presented his map, has demonstrated the correlation as clearly as it can be demonstrated. But miasma theory doesn't die easily. The official report on the outbreak, published later, will acknowledge that the pump was probably the source of the disease, but will stop well short of endorsing Snow's theory of waterborne transmission. It will note that the vitiated atmosphere of the area may also have contributed. It won't fully accept what Snow proved. It will not fully accept it for decades, in fact. Snow dies in 1858. He never sees his theory become accepted medical consensus. He knows he is right, and he is right, and the world takes its time catching up. But something has changed. Not officially, not in policy, not in law, not in the theories that doctors learn in medical schools. Not yet. But something has shifted in the way people think about disease, at least in the people who are paying attention. The map exists, the evidence exists, the pump handle has been removed once, and even if it has been put back, the logic that underpinned its removal is in the world now. It can't be unthought. You think about this at the composing case. You're setting type for the weekly edition of a small religious newspaper that Mr. Coggins has a contract for. Routine work, column after column of dense scriptural commentary and parish announcements. And your hands are doing their work and your mind is running the question that has been running all autumn. What do you do with information that the world isn't ready for? You're 17. You set type for a living. You watched a doctor with a notebook walk your street and ask questions and build evidence out of conversations and count deaths on a map and present his findings to a board that half believed him. The board removed the handle, then they put it back. But the map is in the world. The truth is in the world. Maybe that's enough. Maybe you just put it in the world and wait the way you set type and wait for the press to print it, the way you put the words into their form and trust that eventually the impression will be made on something that holds it. Maybe. You write the letter home in October, you've been putting it off since September, caught between wanting to say everything is fine, which is true in the sense that you haven't died, and not quite being able to write those words when 616 people on your street, people whose faces you know, have not been fine at all. You write it by the window in the back room of the print shop on a Sunday evening, with a candle and the printer's ink that you're so accustomed to having on your hands that it no longer strikes you as remarkable. The light is thin and golden. The street outside is quiet. Dear mother, you write. Dear father, you tell them you are well. You tell them you have been well all through the summer and autumn, thanks to an early change in your water source that you cannot now explain, without also explaining what you are keeping it from, which requires explaining the outbreak, which requires explaining the pump, which requires explaining all of it. So you explain all of it. You write about August, the pump queue in the mornings, the closed door of number 6, the Ely boy, the doctor with his notebook, the handle coming off. You write about standing on Primrose Hill and looking at the city. You write about being frightened and staying anyway. You write, I think I understand now why you said this city was like standing inside a machine. But I've been inside it long enough to see the machinery, and I think it can be fixed. I think that's what we're doing here. Everyone who is here, without quite knowing it, learning how the machine works, finding the parts that are broken. You have to be very close to see them. You have to live inside them. You write, I hope father is better. I will come home for Christmas if Mr. Coggins permits it. I believe he will. You seal the letter with a piece of wax from the candle. You carry it to the postbox on Oxford Street the next morning. Your father writes back in November. The cough is better. Not fully better. Not the way a young man recovers from illness. Clear and sudden. Health returned all at once. But better. The tiredness is less. He's been out to the fields again. He will be at Christmas, the letter says. He's looking forward to seeing you. You fold the letter and put it in your coat pocket and go back to work. The type cases wait. The parliamentary pamphlet, the one about water contamination that has been in production since February, is finally finished and ready to print. You assist with the press run that afternoon, helping Mr. Coggins and Thomas with a Great Iron Albion, feeding paper and adjusting pressure and pulling the proof sheets to check them. The words come off the press black and clear on white paper. Contaminated water source. Investigation required. The relationship between the condition of the water and the rates of disease in working class districts. 6 months late. The evidence it called for already gathered, already mapped, already published by someone who didn't wait for official permission to do the work. You hold the proof sheet by its edges, careful not to smear the still wet ink, and read the words you set and the words you help to print, and you think, this is the trade. This is what the trade does. It takes what someone knows, and it makes it possible for everyone to know it. It takes the truth, and it presses it into paper, and it sends it out into the world. One letter at a time, one proof at a time. Pick the letter, feel the notch, set it in the stick. The winter comes, and I want to tell you something about what winter does to a London street that has just been through what Broad Street has been through, because the seasons don't care about human catastrophe, they just come anyway. The cold arrives in November, with a particular conviction of a thing that has been waiting all year. The cobblestones slick with frost in the mornings, treacherous underfoot. The water in the composing room basin iced over by morning, a thin translucent sheet that you break with your knuckles. Careful of the right hand, always careful of the right hand, before you can wash your face. The gas lamp in the composing room becomes essential rather than merely useful. Without it, the composing room in the early morning is dark as a cave, and the delicate work of finding the right sort in its compartment by feel alone is real work, the kind that teaches you things about your own hands that warm mornings don't. Your right thumb has developed a small callus on its inner pad, precisely where it presses against the foot of each letter when you pick it up. It doesn't hurt. It's just there, a permanent record of months of tiny repeated motion. Thomas has the same callus. You noticed it one evening when you were both at the wash basin, scrubbing ink off your hands with the particular futile thoroughness of people who know the effort is mostly cosmetic. How long does it take to go away, you asked him. Meaning, if you stopped compositing, if you changed trades, if you went home to Wiltshire. Thomas looked at his thumb. My first master's apprentice, the one who was there when I started. He left after a year and a half, went to work for his uncle in some other trade. He still had the callus 2 years later. You looked at your own thumb. I don't think I want to leave, you said, surprising yourself. Thomas looked at you. No, I don't think. I think this is what I'm going to do. This trade. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Good, he said. You're getting quite good at it. High praise from Thomas. December. The frost fairs have not happened yet this winter. The Thames hasn't frozen, just grown sluggish and grey and slightly surly. But there's enough cold to make the street completely different from the summer version you arrived on. The pump is still there, still has its handle, people still use it, you don't. This is a personal decision that you've never formally made and never formally articulated to anyone. You just haven't gone back to the pump since the week of the outbreak. You fill your water from the cask that Mr. Coggins keeps topped up from Wardour Street, and when that's inconvenient you go to the pipe further up the street that connects to the New River Company's supply, which comes from reservoirs north of the city rather than from the ground. A few people on the street have made the same quiet, personal decision. Mrs. Hudson, the coffee shop next door. Mr. Walsh at the bakery, who switched his water source in early September, and mentions this fact regularly and with some pride. Though the public health logic of switching the bakery's water supply when your customers are still drinking from the pump is perhaps not quite as complete as he believes. Some people have gone back to the pump without thinking twice about it. You don't argue. You've tried once with a woman you don't know. It didn't work, but you do not go to the pump, and you are healthy. Christmas. Mr. Coggins gives you 4 days off. This is his annual Christmas gift to apprentices. 4 days of unalloyed liberty, and you take it the way you take any gift, with gratitude and some bewilderment at the sudden presence of time you don't know how to fill. You take the railway to Wiltshire. This requires money you've been setting aside since October. The third-class fare to Swindon, the coach from there to Cote, and most of a day's travel that involves 2 changes and a wait in a cold station at Didcot that test your patience and your thinly soled shoes. But you arrive. Cote looks small, that's the first thing. It looks small in a way it didn't when you left. Not physically smaller. The stone houses are the same size, the church is the same size, the fields stretching away in the winter grey are the same fields. But the scale of it, relative to the scale of what you've spent the last year inside, is suddenly visible in a way it wasn't before. You grew up here and never noticed it was small because you had nothing to compare it to. Now you have 2.5 million people to compare it to. Your mother is at the door before you reach the gate. She must have been watching the road. She looks exactly the same and slightly older, which is impossible and true. Her face when she sees you goes through something you can't quite name. Relief and grief and pride and a kind of sadness that might be the sadness of seeing someone become something different from what they were. You're thin, she says. I eat fine, you say. You're thinner than you were. You're not thinner than you were. You're actually probably slightly broader in the shoulders from 8 months of press work. But your mother has decided you're thin, and your mother will not be redirected on this subject, so you accept it and go inside. Your father is at the table. He looks up. He is thinner. That one is true. The cough has taken something off him. Not catastrophically, not in a way that's immediately alarming, but the way that long illness takes things, a slight narrowing of the face, a settling of the shoulders, a quality of conserved energy. He's 56 years old and he looks it. He stands up when you come in, which he doesn't have to do and probably shouldn't, and you shake his hand and then, because it's Christmas and you've been away for more than a year, and you're young enough that this is still acceptable, you also hug him briefly. He pats your back. You look well, he says. I am well. London treating you right. London treating me right. He sits back down and you sit across from him, and your mother brings something hot from the kitchen, and for a moment you're just in a room with your parents in December in Wiltshire, which is the smallest and most ordinary version of a life imaginable, and it is entirely sufficient and more than you knew you wanted. You tell them about the outbreak over 4 days, in pieces, the way you tell things to people who weren't there, not all at once, not as a narrative with a structure and an ending, just in fragments as it comes up. Your mother asking about the street, your father asking about the pump, you finding yourself explaining what the pump was and what it did and what Jon Snow did and what the map showed. Your father listens carefully. He has a farmer's intelligence about water. He knows about wells, about the soil, about what happens when a cesspit is placed wrong and contaminates the groundwater downhill from it. He knows this in the practical, unscientific way that people know things they've never been taught, but have observed for decades. Of course the water, he says when you finish. Of course it is. The smell of a thing isn't the thing itself. You can smell bad air all your life and never get sick from it, but water, he shakes his head. Water carries things. Water carries everything. Everyone who works with soil knows that. London didn't know that, you say. London knows a lot of things, your father says, and is ignorant about a lot of others. The bigger the city, the more it can be wrong about on a very large scale. This is, you think, one of the most useful sentences anyone has ever said to you. You think about it on the train back to London the 3rd day of January. The fields of Berkshire grey and frost-bitten outside the carriage window, the city assembling itself gradually on the horizon as the train approaches it. The smudge of smoke first, the dome of St. Paul's rising eventually above the roof line, and then the sudden density of it, the buildings crowding in on both sides of the track, the noise and smell reassembling itself around you like a garment you take off only briefly and always put back on. The bigger the city, the more it can be wrong about on a very large scale, and the harder it is to find the person with the notebook who is willing to walk every street and count every door and draw the map that shows you what you're doing to yourself. Spring comes back to Broad Street in 1855 the way spring always comes, which is slowly and then all at once. The crocuses appear in the window box of number 23. The Pirelli family's house, the Italian family with 5 children, which is the first sign every year, the signal that winter's contract has ended. Then the light changes, that particular shift from the flat grey winter light to something with angle and warmth in it. Light that actually casts shadows and makes the wet cobblestone shine. The street fills up again. The empty houses from the autumn gradually begin to show signs of life. New curtains in windows that were dark through winter. A child's voice in a house that was quiet. The sounds of moving. Furniture. The particular thud and scrape of people arriving somewhere and making it theirs. New people mostly. People who weren't here for August. People for whom the pump is just a pump. You watch them. You watch them the way you've been watching London since the day you arrived, with the accumulating knowledge of someone who knows the street in a way that the new arrivals can't yet. You know which boards are loose on the east side of the street. You know which section of the gutter backs up when it rains. You know that the cat from number 15 will steal food from any unattended basket within 10 seconds of its turning unattended. You know about the pump. Most of the new people will never know what August was. They'll drink from the pump and be fine because the immediate source of the contamination has been addressed, because the cesspit was sealed, because the outbreak has passed. They'll look at the pump and see a pump. You look at it and see something else. You see the map that Snow drew, the dots clustering around this piece of iron and stone. 100 people who looked at the same pump and saw the same ordinary thing you see now, and are dead. It's the same pump. You carry that knowledge the way you carry the callus on your right thumb, not painfully, not conspicuously, just as a permanent small fact of what your hands are now. In March, Mr. Coggins gives you a new task, not a new job exactly, not a promotion, not yet. You've got 2 more years of formal apprenticeship and then whatever comes after, but a new responsibility. The invoice ledger, he says, handing it to you one morning. You'll keep it from now on. Enter the jobs, the rates, the materials, balance it weekly. You take the ledger. It's heavy, leather-bound, half-filled with Mr. Coggins's handwriting. Small, very regular. The handwriting of a man who was once an apprentice himself and learned his letters in the same methodical way he learned his trade. You're ready for it, he says, and turns back to his work. He says it the way he says everything, without ceremony, without inflation. You're ready for it. The ledger is yours. You carry it back to the composing room. Thomas at his case gives you a sideways look. "The ledger," he says. "The ledger." Thomas goes back to his type. After a moment, "He gave me the ledger in my 13th month. And, I'm just saying." He picks a sort from the case. "He gave you the ledger in your 11th. You think about this. You don't say anything about it because there's nothing to say that isn't either modest or arrogant, and neither is called for. You just open the ledger to the most recent page and begin reading through the entries, learning the language of the business, understanding where the money comes from and where it goes. This is its own kind of composing. The figures in their columns, the names of customers like sorts in a case. The week's work rendered as mathematics, which turns out to be the same as any other work. It requires precision, it requires patience, and one wrong figure can change everything. You pick up your pen, you begin. This is not a story about the rest of your life. This is a story about 1 year, 1 street, 1 August, and what it means to live through a thing and come out the other side of it as someone different. But before we get to sleep, I want to tell you one more thing about Broad Street. In the autumn of 1855, a year after the outbreak, John Snow publishes an expanded edition of his paper on cholera. It includes the full analysis of the Broad Street case, the map, the statistics, the careful documentation of the exceptions that prove the rule. It's the most complete argument for waterborne transmission of cholera ever made. Most of his colleagues still disagree with him. The medical establishment is not ready. The miasma theory has 100 years of authority behind it and several powerful proponents who are not interested in being wrong. Snow's evidence is dismissed, minimized, called suggestive, but not conclusive. The word suggestive doing the same careful work it always does when powerful people need to avoid the implications of evidence. Snow will die in 1858 without seeing his theory accepted. But, 30 years later, in 1884, a German microbiologist named Robert Koch will identify Vibrio cholerae under a microscope. He will demonstrate conclusively that cholera is a waterborne bacterial infection. He will prove everything Snow argued without microscopes, without germ theory, using nothing but a notebook and a map of a London street, and the willingness to count things carefully. Snow was right. The pump was the source. The water was the mechanism. 40 years after Snow walks Broad Street with his notebook, London builds a proper sewage system. Joseph Basil gets great sewers, running under the city, carrying the waste away to be treated instead of seeping into the drinking water. The Thames becomes something other than an open toilet. The cholera epidemics stop, not because of a miasma, because of the water, the attic room. Late spring 1855. Your last night in this particular room. You've been offered a position. Mr. Coggins has a friend, another printer, a larger establishment on Fleet Street, who needs a journeyman compositor. Not yet a journeyman technically. That's still a year away. But someone who works at that level and will be formally recognised when the apprenticeship completes. The position is better paid, the press is larger, the work is more various. Mr. Coggins recommended you. He told you this yesterday in the same way he tells you everything. Briefly, without ceremony, as if the statement requires no additional weight. I've spoken to my colleague Harker about you. He'd like to see you next week. It's your choice to go or stay. You said you'd think about it. You've thought about it. You're going. The rope bed, the straw mattress, the ceiling with the water stain in the corner that you've stared at, lying awake, 100 times over the past 14 months. Thomas is at his side of the bed, already asleep. He's been here 2.5 years and has 1 year left on the apprenticeship. He's good. He's going to be fine. He's going to have his own shop someday, probably, or a position in a good firm, and his hands will keep their callous, and his eye will get sharper, and he'll be exactly what he is. A skilled man in a skilled trade, reliable, professional, here. Outside, Broad Street makes its late-night sounds, not the sounds of August, not the silence of fear or the crying from closed houses, the ordinary sounds, a cart somewhere, the distant bell of St. Anne's on Dean Street striking 11, someone laughing, a woman's laugh, from the direction of the tavern on the corner. The pump is there. You can't see it from the bed, but you know exactly where it is. You know the sound the handle makes, that particular creak of old iron, and you've been hearing it for over a year, and it is part of the oral furniture of the place in the same way that the church bells are, and the sound of Thomas's breathing, and the creak of the rope bed when you shift position. Tomorrow you'll pack your things, not many things, they fit in a bundle, and tell Mrs. Coggins you're leaving, which will be a brief and correct conversation, and tell Mr. Coggins you'll take the Fleet Street position, which will be a brief and correct conversation, and then in the afternoon you'll walk north to meet Thomas Harker and begin the next thing. But tonight is this. The city does what cities do at night. It doesn't sleep. It shifts registers. The commerce gives way to different commerce. The respectable day trade gives way to the night trade, which is less respectable in various ways, but equally essential to the city's functioning. The streets get quieter but not empty. The gas lamps burn. The watchmen make their rounds. 616 people died on this street last August. The city has moved on, the way cities always move on, with the brutal forward momentum of a thing that cannot afford to stop. The empty houses have new families in them. The pump has its handle. The coffee stall is making its 200 cups a day. The city has moved on, but the map exists. Snow's map. The dots and the streets and the pump at the centre of the cluster. The evidence out in the world, waiting for the world to be ready to receive it. You carry it with you now, not the physical map. You've never seen the actual paper, just heard it described, but the logic of it. The way it demonstrated that what you can't see can kill you, that what tastes clean can be poison, that the truth carefully enough gathered can survive even the refusal to believe it. You carry that the way you carry the callus, quietly, permanently, as part of what your hands know. Your eyes are getting heavy. The ceiling blurs slightly, the familiar drift at the edge of sleep, the point where the boundary between thinking and dreaming starts to dissolve. The water stain on the ceiling becomes less definite, just a shape, just a darkness. The sounds of the street are very distant. You think about your father's hands, the way he patted your back at Christmas, the way his voice sounded when he said London treating you right. Not quite asking, not quite sceptical, just checking. You think about the view from Primrose Hill, the dome of St. Paul's, the copper orange of the Thames at evening, the rooftops going on until they disappeared into haze. You think about the click of type in your fingers, the weight of it, the way the metal warmed slightly as the day went on and your hands worked it, the body heat transferring from skin to lead, the type holding something of you in it, the memorial notice for the father who died at 54. Beloved husband and father, called to his rest in the certainty of resurrection. The wine labels one after another, the parliamentary pamphlet about the water supply finished and printed and out in the world, all of it bearing the impression of your hands. Outside, the bell of St. Anne's strikes the half-hour. The composing room below is dark. The type sits in its cases in the darkness, each sort in its compartment, waiting for tomorrow's hands. The Albion press is covered and still. The ink has dried on the ink table. Tomorrow there will be type to set and ink to distribute and proof to pull. There will be mistakes to find and correct. There will be customers and deliveries and the endless small commerce of a printing house. But that's tomorrow, and you won't be here for it. You'll be on Fleet Street. The city is still out there. 2.5 million people breathing the same sour air, drinking from various sources of varying quality, moving through streets that know everything and explain nothing, building their empire and dismantling it simultaneously, making beautiful things and terrible things in roughly equal proportion. The pump is still out there. The map is still in the world. Some things will change, not all at once, not quickly. Slowly, the way all real change happens, through the accumulation of evidence, through people like Snow walking streets with notebooks, through the slow, grinding work of convincing people to look at the thing they don't want to look at. The sewers will come. They're already being designed somewhere in the offices of civil engineers who are looking at the problem Snow identified and thinking about what it would take to actually solve it. The water will get clean. The cholera will stop. Not in your lifetime, maybe. Not in the lifetime of everyone you know. But the work has been done. The mapping, the proving, the demonstration. The truth is in the world. You put it there, one setting at a time. Your eyes close. The attic room is dark and cool. The spring night not quite warm enough for comfort, and the thin blanket is thin, and the rope bed creaks when Thomas shifts in his sleep. And none of this is uncomfortable anymore. It's just where you are. Where you are is enough. You are warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have learned something this year that you couldn't have learned in Wiltshire, couldn't have learned anywhere except here, inside this specific machine, on this specific street, in this specific August. You've learned that cities lie to themselves, and you've learned that the lie doesn't last. Someone always walks the street with a notebook. Someone always counts the dots. Someone always draws the map that shows where the real danger is. That person is rarely powerful, rarely listened to immediately, rarely thanked in time. But the map is in the world. The handle was removed. Outside, distant, a church bell. Somewhere north of Soho, south of the park, in the general direction of somewhere that doesn't matter right now, a bell is striking midnight, or 11:30. You're too tired to count. The sounds of the city come and go in waves now, each wave a little further away than the last. The pump, the map, the click of letters in a composing stick. Pick, place, pick, place. One sort at a time, one letter at a time, until it's a word, until it's a sentence, until it's a page, until it's everything you know, pressed into paper, sent out into the world to do what truth does when you let it loose. You've done what you came here to do tonight. Let the rest fade. Let the street go quiet. Let the type cool in its cases. Let your hands rest, the right hand especially. The thumb with its callus, the first two fingers with their ink-grey creases, the hands that have built a year's worth of words letter by letter and know the weight of every sort in the English alphabet. Let them rest. Let sleep come up the stairs and through the door and settle in the room the way cold air settles, without announcement, without apology, just taking the space it's entitled to. You've earned this. You are here. You're still here. The city will be here when you wake up, and centuries from now people will still live on this street, and walk past the place where the pump was, there's a plaque there now, or there will be, marking the spot, and they'll know the story. What happened here, what the water did, what the map proved. They'll know because someone wrote it down, because someone walked the street with a notebook, because someone set the type. Some things don't change. The need for someone to pay close attention, the need for someone to count the things that are being ignored, the need, at the end of a long day of careful work, for rest. Take yours. Good night.